Casual Magic has been brought to you by CoolStuffInc, where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL to get 5% off of your sale. And then also by Coalesce Apparel, where you can get really cool t-shirts and stuff, and use the code CASUALMAGIC to get 10% off your sale. And by Archidekt, a deck hosting website that doesn't really sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them. And now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam, Bhatt, and Casual Magic is brought to you by CoolStuffInc, where you can get 5% off your sale using the code CASUAL, and Coalesce Apparel, where you can get my brand new t-shirt and sticker and 10% off your purchase using the code CASUALMAGIC, and by Archidekt, who doesn't sell anything. And there's no code, but I just really like them, and they're really responsive and nice, and I like putting all of my decks there, and I think y'all should too. Also, I have new news that I am now an affiliate sponsor of Quiver Time, my personal favorite deck conveyance device. Deck box thing. I don't know what it's called. It's like a big case on a sling that I just put on my shoulder.
It's a quiver.
It's a quiver. It's literally a quiver.
A quiver. Yeah.
It could hold arrows just fine. But right. Yeah, Quiver Time. You can go there and use the code CASUAL and get 10% off your sale. And that's really cool of them because I've been sponsoring them for free for years. I've been just shouting them out because I love quivers. They're my personal favorite.
Yep. Trick like turned me on to them very early on. I have like a first generation one, and since then it's just like, okay, what am I doing carrying these things around? Yeah, like
here's otherwise? The thing. Okay. Hang on a second. I will get to you in a second, guest. Wait your turn.
You're talking about things I love.
You can't talk before I introduce you, man. Good gravy. But the point, though, is that, okay, I'll do this quick. So my guest today is my dear friend Hobbes of the Goblin Lore podcast. He's also just on Magic Twitter. If you've been a Vorthos or if you've been a Twitter, core member for like the past, let's say 5 to 7 years, you know who Hobbes is. He shows up all over the place. He's kind and gentle. I'm a big fan of his. We've been friends for a long time, and we've been trying to get him on my show for as long as I've had a show. So here we are 100 episodes in, and I've decided now would be a good time to have you on, Hobbes. Welcome to my show.
Thank you. Yeah, you started talking about all these things that I just love. I was like, Archidekt. I just put decks up on there last night. Quiver. Yes, I just busted out a new one to put new stickers on.
Right? That's the one thing. Putting stickers on my quiver is really difficult. Maybe it's just the quality of the stickers I use, but it's been I've had to use some tape and stuff. But I don't care. The point though is, I used to carry around a backpack full of boulders, a backpack full of Ultra Pro satin towers, and just my big, thick, heavy wooden handmade deck boxes and everything, like the one I use for my Tajik deck. And it's just, I realized that at one GP, I was carrying something like 40 or 50 pounds of deck box material in my backpack. Because, we're stupid and we go to a GP thinking, we're going to play every deck. Which deck would I want to bring? Of course, I'm going to want to bring 30 of them. And then you're just lugging these things around. It's like, realistically speaking, you're not going to play that draft, so maybe you don't need to carry 3 boxes worth of cards with you and basic lands, or you don't need 12 commander decks in individual deck boxes. And then I got a quiver, and it was like, hey, look, I can do all of this. I can put 5 decks in here. It's limitations breed creativity. Put 5 decks that I have to pick from or whatever. I can shove my my playmat in there, put my dice in my backpack. My backpack is now free for water and dice and crap and whatever, I don't know, 1 extra deck or something. But my quiver has the decks I'm going to play, and I can just lug it with me, and it's light. It's easy.
And I'm not worried about it getting it can be slung around my shoulder. I have it connected to me.
It's hard to take. It's hard to take it off of me. It's very heavy. It's bulky, and it's I can swing it as a weapon. And one of the tips that you learn when you go to events, now that we're going to be going back to events, is that, by we, I mean, some people are brave enough to put on events and some people are brave enough to go to them. You can take your quiver when you're sitting down And when you sit in those chairs at the convention hall, just loop one of the chair legs over the quiver strap and no one will take your thing. They can't. The one thing I wish they did was that the zippers, I wish they had little holes in them at the top so I could put a lock like you do at
like the suitcase, the mini suitcase
exactly,
ones.
Like a suitcase lock.
That would be nice.
But they're
hey,
I've
Quiver.
been bringing up them for years. But there's like reasons for it.
Yeah, I know.
But anyways, Quiver's rad, and I've supported them for years, and now they've decided to support me, so I'm all for that.
I was really excited when I saw the announcement. Especially you being announced as kind of the first of their new like affiliate.
I was the reason they made the program, and I was like, let's go, bitch. Let's go, pal. Let's do it. Family friendly show.
And both of us as dads, so I still am working on this skill.
Oh my god. My parent teacher conference today with my son, one of the things that came up was like, so we've been hearing some words from your son lately, and I'm like,
that could go any direction.
That's not the conversation I want to have with you or him or any human. Oh my gracious.
I grew up around oil field workers, and like my mom's, one of her favorite stories was the school called her to say that that I had been using language, and one of the things that said to her that her son was saying like bad words, and they said no, he used the F word. And my mom, knowing that I grew up around my dad's oil field friends, was I was like 6, and she was really very concerned. But then it was a Quaker school that I went to. It turned out that the word that they were concerned that I was using was fart. My mom like flat out just laughed at them. Like she just laughed at them and was like, "You called me out of like work because my 6-year-old said fart." Like, so. Like, to be fair, she was justified in the fact that like I did hear language that I probably shouldn't have at a young age, but
certainly,
yeah.
And God knows, we all fear the gaseous release. The Lord looketh down upon our butts.
Yeah.
See, I grew up with my parents. The main language in my house was Gujarati, and so when my dad swore, it was in Gujarati, and I didn't know those are bad words, and so I wasn't going to repeat them in English because it didn't matter because I didn't know the bad words in English. But like I can swear like a train worker in Gujarat if I was there. But I definitely learned that one the hard way when I was talking to various aunts and uncles, and I'd be like the equivalent of and it's like, what did you say? And I'm like, oh, is that what that means? Oh, that's bad.
I had some experiences with this in when I visited the UK, which is still English, right? But
I mean, technically,
but my grandmother is from the UK, met my grandfather who was in the Air Force, and one night he like playfully was talking about he was gonna slap her on her fanny, not realizing that on a woman in the UK is not the behind.
Boy, isn't.
And all of her male relatives in particular had very strong reactions to my grandfather saying this. So
yeah, English in America, 2 languages, one language separated by an ocean, and it's a real trip sometimes. Especially with the fact that when you're playing video games and stuff, and you see things like words like bloody or just okay, and it's like, that doesn't mean the same thing over there, my friend. But anyways, Hobbes, the reason I brought you on is because, among other things, besides the fact that we are both, dads and older content creators and like hobbyists who do this, not necessarily careerists. The other thing is that one of the things that you and I both share is a very strong advocacy for mental health and for the well-being of our players in our communities. You in the capacity of actually being like a clinical mental health mental health.
I'm a psychologist. Yeah, I'm a psychologist at a
I wasn't
VA
going to say like
hospital.
I was the clinician or technician or tinkerer. I don't know, but
tinkerer would make me sound way cooler.
Head jockey. But yes, as an actual like trained psychologist, and me as a a clergyman, as it were, we both deal in the same kinds of problems from similar angles, but not quite the same.
Right.
In the sense of like, we have friends and people we talk to who are obviously in need of help and in need of having somebody sit there and walk them through ways to kind of chill their life down a bit. And you have far more experience than I do. And one of the things I really appreciate about you, especially on Twitter, is how strongly you advocate for the mental health of folks in our community. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on, is because as we hit now, we're recording this on literally the second anniversary of lockdown in America, right? So it's been one of the hardest times in modern history for a large swath of the world, not counting people, in wars or in actual situations, but like most of us who have lived in comfort and happiness our whole life, whose worst thing to worry about was, will I be able to get the deck for the weekend, suddenly have to deal with a lot of things like, oh, this house that I used to just kind of like sleep in and then leave is now everything I'm in all the time. These people that I live with are now the only people I get to deal with. And all of these situations are very taxing, especially when you've got the outer simulation of the world is falling apart in 30 different ways every 10 minutes. What's
We
it
were
been
laughing
like for you, man?
Well, I kind of laugh about this from the perspective of the Goblin Lore podcast, in the sense that, you kind of talk about we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary as we are recording right now. A week before the pandemic, Alex and I recorded an episode with Chase on how to deal with social anxiety at magic events. And we recorded it a week before the pandemic and literally put it out like 2 weeks into the lockdown. This whole thing about like, here's ways to be more comfortable around being around large groups of people if you don't do that. Like, here's ways to enjoy being able to go to a magic fest. If just here's good ways to practice things like not avoidance, but having a comfort level. And we put it out literally 2 weeks into a pandemic with acknowledgement of this, and then it's still been going.
Like,
and
it's wild because like when I started this podcast, I had plans that I was going to go to events and we were going to record in person and it's going to be great and all these things are going to happen. We went to Reno. I announced that we were doing the show. I think I did like an episode or 3 and then phoomp. And one of the things, like I've mentioned over and over again on the show, this show might be the reason that I didn't go lose my mind over pandemic, because this gives me a guaranteed weekly one-on-one conversation with somebody that I'm interested in talking to, which is not a lot, but when you're an extrovert stuck within 4 walls and you and your wife have run out of stories to tell each other and your son can only tell you so many different ways that Pikachu is yellow or whatever,
or the same 3 stories
or
repeated.
The same 3 stories, right? Like, or like, he's watching a YouTube video next to me and then stopping to tell me what happened in the YouTube video that he just watched. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm right here.
But
being able to have intelligent human conversation with adults has been a life-saving, like, kind of endeavor. This is like, my wife and I have this agreement because she's not necessarily as extroverted as I. In fact, before we met, she was like hard introvert, right? And so her being in like quiet with just, our kid, the TV, movies, and books, this is fine. She can handle. But she knows that if I'm like unable to go out and play magic or hang out with people or whatever, I would lose my like just complete sense of self. And so this kind of podcast was like our compromise. She's like, look, I don't want to become a single parent doing this, but I'm super okay with you just going and spending a couple hours a week on this podcast or whatever events or whatever you're doing, like these online things, to just be able to get this out of your system. And with this and like with Spell Table and Discord and all these things, I think we've managed to find as a community a way to build and develop a new sense of being able to handle our needs to communicate with other humans. But also we've learned better. Well, I mean, some of us have. Some of us have learned better ways to communicate and to share our feelings and to realize that when you're like this and when you're starting to go spiraling down, you have to reach out because there's nobody's going to see you because you're in your home. And so there have been people who've reached out to me and been like, "Yo, Shivam, I need to talk to somebody and get right with the Lord, whichever Lord I'm into at the moment." And I'm like, "Look, I'm here for you. Let me help you get out of whatever hole you're in." And it's been good for me and it's been good for them. But I know that, like in the clergy circles, it has been incredibly hard for us to take on the burdens of congregations and the internet and everybody who looks to us as a counselor because we have our own families and lockdown and stuff to deal with too. And when you get down to the, physician heal thyself, that's a real rough gig.
Yeah. And I think that, so, you mentioned one thing with my real job, and then the aspect of it that, I keep that professional separation between my personal life and my not, but I am also somebody that has a pretty significant history with depression and anxiety. So, this kind of almost idea that I'm going to go in and be able to be 100% on to do teletherapy that I had never had any training in or any kind of desire. Well, there was desire there, but it was kind of like, this is the funny part of the government system that I can talk about is, well, we can't set up these things like telehealth for you. It's really difficult. It's impossible. Pandemic happens a week later. We all had ability to be online and to be seeing people virtually. So it's just that cracking up to me of like, yeah, we just don't have the infrastructure yet. They can get the infrastructure within a week.
Turns out
it's possible.
They just didn't have the will.
Yeah. And so, I have to go from, all of my experience and all of my clinical years has been in face-to-face in a room with people. And so this is actually something that, looking at time travel and podcasts, something that we talked about with Gavin when he came on, that idea of like, you and I are recording tonight. I don't know when this will necessarily come out because that's how things go. Tomorrow night, as in recording time, Alex and I are recording about telehealth and teletechnology and what both the pros and the cons are. And when I put that call out onto Twitter, people were willing to admit that there are cons. Like this is not necessarily a perfect analog. And I think that has kind of been something I've been struggling with that line myself a lot during that pandemic is, how am I still being the most effective therapist I can be? And how can I be the best advocate for somebody's mental health when half of my job, I would say, was trying to get people more socially engaged?
Right.
Like that's one of the number one things people come in to me for is difficulty with socializing. And
how do you socialize when we can't socialize?
Right. You and I are talking like we have magic. We're comfortable with technology. I'm working with a lot of people that aren't, and that that don't feel comfortable going out into public, nor do I think that they should be doing that. Most of the techniques and the tricks and the things that I had and the resources I had were like how to get involved in your community that you can no longer get involved in.
Right. That's one of the big things you deal with is like, how do you meet people? How do you find friends?
Yes.
How do you find people you can talk to?
Yeah.
Once you have a community of people you can just sit and chill and chat with, then you're no longer feeling that sense of loneliness, and you don't have the depression, anxiety stuff kind of just, you at least have tools, or not tools, but you have vents and people you can talk to and private chats you can go to. But that works if you're like us, if you're technologically driven, if you're engaged online, if you understand how to use these tools. But if you're an older person, or if you're a less tech savvy user these days, or you're not a gamer, or you're someone who's socializing with going to bars,
right,
like, yeah, look, as gamers, we have this kind of like secret weapon that people didn't realize, which is that we're used to being pseudo isolated, because when that as long as you have Twitter or Discord or chat rooms or Slack or whatever. We're never isolated. Your best friends you may have never seen before. Some of the people who I consider the most close and confidant to me in my life, I have known for 25 years as a screen name, and literally never seen, never met in person, never will meet in person. And it doesn't matter, right? But we're of that age group that we have those kind of connections that we can lean and fall back on. But there are people who are like, who are just not into tech, whose like whole jam was, I go to F&M, I go to the bar, I go to the game, I meet people.
Yep.
Now what do I do? And I'm
now
like,
what do I do? Yeah, like, oh, yeah, like, well, yes, that's just it. Like, okay, here's my thing. Okay, yeah, let's find what's in your area. Meetup.org is an amazing website. So if people are out there, once we're in a world where you feel safe, Meetup has actually been something that I've used for going on 10 years with people to find activities in their community. It was literally just basically taken away from me. Like, I mean, like, okay, right. Like, okay, I don't want to, so I tend to work with people with more serious mental illness. Schizophrenia is kind of like the area that I'm most trained in. There's a lot of mistrust, and a lot of, being on technology is something that for a not insignificant amount of people I worked with was a huge barrier. People could see into their home. Because if we're doing a group, so if I'm doing a group and we're all on video together, right? Yeah, we try to mitigate these things by saying maybe you don't need to be on video the whole time, right? But it still is something that could easily activate what is already a big issue. And
right.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you also hit on it a little bit too. We then add in and pepper in all of these other just normal, big, huge life world events. I think about like a few months after this, we're going to hit the anniversary of George Floyd. I mean, obviously I'm getting hit a little bit more harder by that by being in Minnesota, being blocks from where everything happened. But like we rolled from a pandemic that was keeping us indoors into injustice. And then this like
the riots and the marches
and protests and just re-bringing up the racial trauma in America again to the forefront in the middle of a pandemic. Okay, we're all from that to an election. Like, I mean, it's just
oh god, dude. Yeah, seriously, 2020. I mean, that was a year of like just chained nightmare for Americans, right? Like, like it was just one lengthy different series of hells. Like, what is the worst part of life now? Oh, the white supremacist. Oh, the pandemic. Oh, the plague. Oh, the fact that my aunt is stuck in India and can't get a flight out to America before, like all the et cetera, like, random family members dying of COVID. We're all going to die. It was Magic's greatest year ever. You know why? Because we were stuck at home and we were terrified, and we had a lot of money that we were not spending on gas and food that had to go somewhere. Really? And by God, Korea is where it's going.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I definitely found myself like I've got a little bit extra.
Like that these guys were definitely not thinking about pandemics when they picked Space Godzilla Death Corona to be there.
We're gonna do this really cool crossover.
Yeah, it was just like, oh crap.
But I mean, like, we look at like the pace of things with what was planned. We know how magic works, how things are planned out. My mental health struggles to keep up with sets, and then it feels like we're just gone because there's just this. We're on to another plane, but I never actually did the things I normally do for a set. I don't do a ton of in-store play. But I usually did pre-releases. I did these things that I never really feel like I got to engage with. And I think it's really revealed more to me about Magic being both that I've talked about this online a little bit about when our hobbies and our things that are our coping strategies also can be dangerous for how we engage with them. And Magic has always been something that to me, I can get too wrapped up into it.
Of course.
And a pandemic allows that even more so. You even said we had these communities, but that pushes us online. That pushes me to, if I don't doom scroll on Twitter, or even if it's just I don't want to look at everything, where do I go?
this leads right into like, what was the biggest event to happen in 2020 in Magic wise, right? The fact that the Walking Dead freaking secret lair, like when you think about that week of just like random death threats that I was getting sent because WotC decided to do something that
yes,
that the rules committee decided not to do anything about, so it was
yes.
my fault on the CAG, and I'm like, there's a chain of events here that has come
Like,
that you have come through that I don't know that I can necessarily
I
stand with
cannot.
you on.
Yeah, I can't even piece together
Like
the
the
thread.
chain that led
Yeah,
you from being angry at the corporation to me
to
is
me,
I'm not
sitting
sure
at my
about.
home in front of a microphone.
Like it's like, wait, what? But what happened there? But what happened there, though, is it's like really, when you think about it, it makes sense because not sense in what they were doing, but sense why. Because it was in November, it was right at the tail end of a very, very contentious and nightmarish election season where a lot of understandings of society were being upended, where we were realizing suddenly that there were a lot of white supremacists and, just weird nightmare people running around culture. There was a lot of cultural war going on. There was a lot of, the pandemic had pent everybody up. George Floyd had pent everybody up. There was a lot of just anger at something, and someone needed to be directed at something. And they were like, "This Walking Dead thing is not for me. I'm going to lose my goddamn mind and light everything on fire." And it's like a pressure cooker, right? Like when you've got all that steam building up and there's nowhere to go except for the little whistle, it's going to blow the hell out of that whistle because that's the only vent it has. And this was the vent that a lot of the community had, and it led to some of the most ludicrous ridiculousness I've ever seen and some of the most like insane flames in Magic in years for nothing. Because I remember I was talking to some spikier players and they were like, what the hell is going on over there? Your Twitter feed looks insane. And I'm like, bro, just stick to your standard and don't look this direction.
Just don't look.
Your
Yeah,
Magic is doing great. Just stay over there.
yeah. Well, I mean, because and this is what I was actually discussing a little bit earlier this week about some of that interest of spell table Magic, to be able to play online with people in a much better way than anything we kind of had before. Has both done a lot of it's that kind of thing that it's like I always say the community is the best and worst part of Magic. And I feel like us having spell table and that and has also been one of the best and difficult things for Commander as a format. And I would say that is just kind of there's no time for anything, and the games that you see are very limited. If you're watching streams, which is what I think a lot more people got to do, you're seeing games that are a very specific kind and they need to be entertaining in a different way than when I would go to an LGS or get together with a specific play group and we might knock out 4 or 5 games in a night. Like I could just swap up decks. If something bad happens or there's a game that wasn't great, I could swap up decks. If I join a stream and there's a game that goes a little awkwardly or it's just not a matched level, that could be it, right? Like that's you get in one game, maybe 2 games, depending. I mean, and like trust me. So May we have coming up a mental health charity event for Magic. We're doing 2 of them a year, at least as right now. We may add more in, but this is something that we started last year. This is something that is made possible by us having this platform. I tried to play in like 4 or 5 streams in one day. It killed me. Like I could go to a GP and do it, but trying to be on a camera, trying to be feeling that I have to be entertaining when I'm on something like that, like it's harder for me to just find a game. And I understand that that's like, I'm sure that I could, but I'm very limited with my amount of time. And
right.
There's people I want to play with and a lot of those people are streaming, but there is kind of this pressure of like, a lot of this is self-imposed. Like I last night played my Angus Mackenzie Enchantress deck and the game went great. It went fine. In the back of my head, I'm always worried about like, is this the game I'm going to play that people are going to be like, wow, he's really a jerk and just wants to play these spiky decks and we don't ever want to see him again on this like type of thing, or this deck's going to win too quickly. What do I do here? And my mind just starts like, I start activating my own anxiety and depression starts getting kicked in for something, because I also feel like I need to be entertaining and be able to like, yeah. And like, I'm an extrovert. I'm an introverted extrovert. I'm on the line, like, what's really funny. Right. So if you look at like psychological testing, some of it is, horoscope for intellectual people, but there is this concept of introversion and extroversion. And anybody that knows me knows that I do not like to talk about things as like static variables, that it's an either or. I'm a very much a continuous person. It's a spectrum. And introversion, at the very least, introversion, extroversion are a spectrum. Nobody is going to be just full extrovert, full introvert. We're all going to fall somewhere along this line. And it is a line that I actually fall very much in the middle on. Like, for a lot of things, I don't. I tend to skew. This is something that I tend to be very middle of the road. Like, I am the type of person that after a day or two at a GP, I'm ready to go. Like, I don't need another day there, because I need to, or I need to be able to go have somewhere to go step away and like recharge. I need that.
Whereas I went to Las Vegas this past year, and I was a helium bomb for the next like, month and a half, 2 months of just like floating off of all of that like instantaneous recharge.
Right.
Like it was like, it felt like there's a rover that is on a comet right now, and it is in the dark, and it's solar powered, and that thing doesn't get power. And then like randomly it got hit by sunlight enough to charge the batteries, enough to send messages back. That's what I felt like. I've been in the shadows, locked away, discharged, and then going there was enough to like light me up for like carry me through the dark part of the year.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, yes, you do need eventually a time to step away and calm down, and because nobody is all the way pegged as full introvert, full extrovert. And the binary dichotomy is it's so limiting.
Yeah,
it's so just like,
yeah.
I mean, all binaries tend to be limiting, right? Like,
right.
Not everybody is all the way all the time. Even though I'm pretty far all the way all the time,
right?
I don't know, but the thing is, especially in this pandemic time, it's been really hard for people who are like me to find outlets. And yeah, you're right. Like, I want to play my Magic decks, and I want to play them with my friends. And then people are like, there was somebody who complains like, hey, how come all your streams are always just these same like 6 to 8 incestuous people just like playing with each other on their streams? You guys never invite strangers on. There's no way for people to break into the group. I'm like, that's because we're just literally friends who would be playing Magic normally, but we just flip a camera on because it's somebody's profit. I mean, it's somebody's like income stream, not because like we need to do that, right? We're just doing it because we would be playing either way, but this way everybody else gets to see. That's all.
Right. But that can also, like you said, it fuels some of that beliefs about just in beliefs about the community and beliefs about, resentment. Because, the understanding isn't necessarily there.
Right.
And pushing that out is hard to. It's hard to get people to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I mean, I ran into this at the GP Vegas too. It's like, before I went to the thing, I made sure to make an announcement saying like, hey guys, I'm happy to say hello, happy to, sign whatever to talk, but I'm going here to meet my friends. My friends also happen to be content creators. Please don't think of this as being elitist. This is just me being able to meet with my colleagues and jam games with them. And I'm sorry if I can't play with you. And for the most part, people understood, because once you explain like, hey, look, I haven't seen my friends in a year or 2 years or whatever, we're still humans. And then people understand. But otherwise, you do give off a bit of a vibe. They're like, oh, so you're too cool for us? I'm like, no. But you came here to see your friend. I came here to see my friend. It just happens that my friends are the people you want to see.
It's a weird,
it's weird.
Our community is always a microcosm of like the wider world. And, it's interesting to see when things get pushed out from the wider community down to ours, and from our community out. One of the things that sticks out to me is like, some of the gamer gates and some of those things that happen started in the gaming community. And we've seen those techniques push out wider. And I think that one of the things that people don't realize with content creation is there are those, there's been some great writings on like these ideas of parasocial relationships. And the thing is, I get along really well with the people that I get to interact with on a daily basis. Right. There is kind of that difficulty, even for me as a small, I would say, as a small creator, like like the Goblin Lord, we're like you said, you and I were talking before we got on. We're dads. We have other jobs. We're older. Like magic content creation is definitely not necessarily like our primary income or something like that. And it's a little easier for me to be able to separate myself. I can't imagine being somebody who it depends on and seeing kind of how those people, like, you get to know them, you get to hear their words pushed out. And so you feel like you have some connection to them. And as you're saying, a lot of those creators are just at an event because they want to see the same people that you want to see, but they're also, they have these relationships with them that are maybe deeper, and it's what makes public events fascinating to me as a like studier of humans. Yeah.
Okay. So with that in mind, what do you think, as we kind of enter into this weird quasi space of pseudo opening up and maybe not really, we shouldn't be, but we're going to be, because capitalism demands it. How, like, what kind of things do you think people should expect to, or should try to prepare for in this transition back to humanity?
I think so. This is something I'm struggling with a little bit myself, because I'm even thinking about the fact that like my work, is having us starting, like they scaled back again, but they were starting to have us come in more and to be on site. And I'm thinking of like the fact that I developed actually even separate from, like you talked about the idea of like, we weren't really going anywhere, but at the same time, there were certain things that I had developed or I had gotten out of working from home. Like I have windows next to me. I'm pointing to the audience that you can't see on this audio only format, but I have windows. I don't have a window at the VA. I like literally work in a medical center with no windows on the interior. So like, I don't have that. My dog can be laying down here in the basement with me. If I have somebody that doesn't show up for an appointment, I can get up and go for a walk. I can get up and have lunch upstairs. If my wife happens to be at home, I can have lunch with her. So like from a work standpoint, it's funny because, it's like, that's the whole thing. There was a really bad Toronto ad campaign that some group thought would be funny. That was missing your dog yet? Do your sweatpants miss you? And it's like,
why would you do that? I'm just going to turn around and go right back home.
like that's like, yeah, like I was really funny when they announced to us that we were going to be coming back to on site more often, even if we weren't seeing people on site. Almost all of my video visits right now are still video visits. People have the choice to come in, but if they come in, it's mask, face shield, whole shebang. So I would have nobody scheduled. I'd have to go sit in a windowless office to do a video appointments all day long. And the day that they kind of announced this, they also sent out an email about like self-care, which to me in the corporate world is always funny. It's like, here's these great websites and resources you can go to for self-care. And I'm like, you mean the lack of me having a commute, like that you're making me come back in for, like, or you schedule me a yoga hour over the lunch that I'm working during. The only people, if you ever go to them, are leadership. This is really poorly timed. But thinking about like opening up, getting used to actually, God, I don't know, like I get uncomfortable. We went to Iowa this past weekend just to kind of get out of town. Like my wife went to medical school there. We had the ability to just kind of, it's a couple hour drive. We're working on getting our children used to being in the car more often. So we went.
Yeah. That was the thing that I didn't realize I needed to do. Was like, oh yeah, we need to teach them how to sit in the car for a few hours.
Right. Like, cause where have we been going? And so so like when we were doing this, Iowa has less masks than Minnesota. And it felt weird. Cause me and my wife are still wearing masks, we're not planning on changing that. So me not feeling like like I am an anxious person. And so when I get out in public and I'm doing something different than everybody else, and I'll say it went fine. Once again, let's talk about expectations, because expectations are one of my favorite things ever. I hear these stories about people being told, like, why are you still wearing a mask? Why are you doing this?
Because I don't want to catch a cold, man.
But I didn't get asked. We didn't get asked. I was expecting to, and my whole brain was like preparing for what I was going to do if somebody asked me. It didn't happen. It's just that I like to throw that in for like sometimes what we expect doesn't happen. But like getting used to, if we start getting to the point where where's that line going to be for me where I feel comfortable not wearing a mask? So I think me still going out, opening up, going to places is kind of like, I'm getting to the point where I feel comfortable if I'm still taking my precautions that I want to see people. But maybe that's going to be like microdosing. I'm going to need to build up to it. Like for me personally.
Well, yeah, I mean, Vegas was like, for instance, such a huge,
it's like flooding.
Think about it. I mean, think about what that is. Like, okay, a year and a half, I've gone barely anywhere. I mean, my family we ended up taking a vacation to Santa Barbara, just drove down and went to the beach or whatever. But like, you know, we
hung out with my parents basically. No,
right. Like, yeah, I saw my parents and my in-laws, and then like the people, my friends.
That's like an hour from, Santa Barbara's like an hour from where I grew up.
Oh, well, yeah, Santa Barbara is like an 8-hour drive south of where I'm from.
Yeah, that's what I know that. Yeah, I know California geography. That reminds me of when I went to undergrad and I told people, they asked where I lived, and I was like, oh, an hour north of LA. And they were like, so you live close to San Francisco? I'm like, you don't understand geography.
No. The funniest story ever is that my friend worked at Disneyland, and somebody was asking him, like a British couple was there, and they were like, excuse me, what time do we need to leave to make dinner in San Francisco? And he's like, 3 days ago.
That's awesome. But yes, sorry. So Vegas happened.
But yeah, so the point though is like, so I get on a plane out of nowhere, go to Las Vegas, and suddenly it's like all of these things are just like lumped together, right? Like it's just, whoa, I have just entered into a portal where COVID never happened, and the world is super weird. But yeah, it was just like turning the spigot on and then just sticking your face in the fire hydrant, right?
Yeah.
And recently I went down to Los Angeles to film I Hate Your Deck, and down there, still though, taking the plane, getting on a mat, I mean, wearing the mask, going down and doing everything, it was like fine. It was fine. Yeah. I was able to deal with it. I went down, no problem. We all handled our business. Came back, nobody was sick. It was great because it turns out you can adapt. Things are adaptable.
And I think that's the idea is like, Vegas was like, to me, like as an outsider looking, knowing that I wasn't going to be able to go, it really felt like the difference. If you're doing like exposure therapy for something like a phobia, it's really, you do like these graduated exposures where you kind of like build up to feared things. So, like if let's just take an airplane ride. Let's forget like the fact that we're talking like 12 things. Let's take an airplane. If you're somebody who's afraid of flying, like you generally don't just get on a plane and fly. If you have a real legit phobia, you do things like watch flights, you build up to going to an airport. I mean, there's all these steps that you can take. The other method, which can work, but can also have really bad consequences, is flooding, where you just literally would take somebody to the airport and stick them on an airplane. And you have a phobia of flying. Oh, well, we somehow force you to get on there and you go. Both strategies can work. But flooding is generally not the one that we do. Vegas was like a flood. Vegas was like, and that's, I'm going to anticipate that people may not realize that they need to build back up.
Oh, there were definitely people there who I could tell they were like disappear for an hour or two because you knew that they just burnt out. Like they got in there, it was overwhelming, and then they were just like, I need to check back out into the hotel. I'll be back later, but I am off this and out. And I get that. I get that because it's exhausting being around that many people without, like, after so long, and you've lost all the training on how to do this. Like I remember I was even talking to like Reed Duke on the show, and he was like, yeah, man, we'd forgotten how to hold cards. We've forgotten how to like deal with companions in paper, like it's like, oh
yeah, Arena, MTGO did those things. I mean, just Commander players, at least we still had that ability. We got them. No, but it's true. I don't do a lot of competitive play. I did day 2 of Legacy GP in Vegas one year, and day 2, I legitimately quote unquote cheated. Like I played a card incorrectly that neither me nor my opponent caught because I was used to MTGO doing it for me, which would be Burning Wish. So if you Burning Wish, which is a card that lets you go get something from your sideboard, I did not realize that Burning Wish exiles itself because MTGO always just exiled it. So if I was looking through targets in my graveyard, it wasn't there. Well, I put it in my graveyard at a tournament and flashed it back. neither me nor my opponent noticed. Like cards are weird. I can only imagine being a pro that's like hasn't held cards. Like
it's weird because like there's just simple things that we just forget about because we haven't done this in a minute. Like for me, I guess the exposure therapy was going to like pre-release at my store with all masks. Like my storekeeper kept amazing precautions. Like he basically had every table set up so that there was plexiglass barriers between all the like spaces. And it was literally like almost like, have you ever seen like the prisons where they're like you're talking to the prisoner on the other side and you have to pick up the phone and on the other side it was like being on that side of the glass barrier.
I'm just picturing you now at it with like picking up a phone to communicate your plays to your opponent.
How many cards do you have in hand? Click, yeah, like I mean, but it worked and we were able to play and we were able to get that feel again so that you could wind up and walk up and get dealing with people again. But it's weird. Like you're going out and stuff and you're like, oh my God, there's like people. I don't know how to deal with people. That's strange. And I'm not saying people need to, like, the pandemic's still going on. All these problems, the war in Ukraine, the gas prices, the job market, everything, the world is still tilting on its axis. The climate is still falling apart. You know, trans people are getting hated out of society.
We're still on fire.
Yeah, like we're still on fire.
We're literally still the dog. We're just having a little bit of a fine moment directly around us.
Yeah,
maybe.
But it's so important to take these moments and just remember that you can enjoy life. Like you've got to be able to sit there and find things to latch onto. Like I look out my window and I can see in my backyard, my orange tree's got fruit on it and my garden is blooming. And, I'm like, everything is dying and we're all going to hell, but it smells really nice here, or like, oh, I can go drive to San Francisco and then go to the beach and just look at the water and see. And it's like, it's nice. Or take my son to fly a kite in a park or, whatever it is. Like we have to find ways to find the small joys in life. Otherwise we're going to get swallowed by the doom and gloom, right?
So like I'm a really big fan of this of what's called like positive psychology, because I do think you and I have both been very much talking about mental health, and I think that adding that idea of health, but also and wellness, and not just mental illness or like the symptoms, but like what can we learn from happy people? What can we learn from people that are doing well? What can we learn from that? There was a project called the Happiness Project. It was part of something larger called Bounce Back that my wife and I went to a couple of years ago, some talks on. And we even then had implemented this idea of doing daily gratitude, or even if it is just my cup of coffee this morning that I had that was warm in my hand was one good thing. And we will sit at night, and we've been working on doing this with our daughter. And even though she's only 3, like she gets the idea of the fact that we're going to sit and do these 3 good things today. Like what was 3 good things that happened to you today? No matter what they were. And it doesn't have to be, I think like you said, the orange tree outside my window could easily be a thing on your list. And it's just to notice the fact that, I am very much not a Pollyanna. I always tell people, I'm not saying like you need to just pay attention to the positive. Like there's such a thing as toxic positivity, right? Like, but it's the fact that for a lot of us, and me definitely, toxic positivity and being positive is not really my issue. My issue is that I'm not letting those 3 good things come through my head at all. Like it's not. I'm just trying to balance out all of the really bad thoughts.
Positivity, positivity.
Yeah, right. Like the whole point being, like those 3 things were happening every day. I just wasn't giving them any weight. So I'm going to choose to give them some more weight. I'm going to make an intentional decision. And then also, what's one thing that you're looking forward to tomorrow? something that you at least have a hope for. And like this has been a way that I kind of think of that I've been trying to do, as you said, to kind of recognize that all of those problems are there. All those problems are things that I feel deeply, passionately about. And I also am a human being, and I also have to live my life, and I also have to be a father and a husband, and I do have those roles that are important to me too. And so I need to find the ways that I'm still engaging with those.
One of the things that my practice teaches is that you cannot be a good functioning adult or a functioning human unless you are also taking care of yourself at the same time. In the sense of like, if you are not right with yourself, you will not be right with anybody else, and you can't help anybody else because your mental state becomes taken up with the imbalances that you are feeling. And the fact that you're unhappy, or the fact that you're just being weighted down by the darkness, whatever the darkness happens to be, if you can't find the glowing points of light in there, you can't help ignite anybody else's happiness. And that's like one of the things I've learned most in this time period is like, playing with my son, and we sit and play Pokemon, and it's like, look, I beat this gym leader, or I got this shiny, or you find yourself small goals. These small goals give you happiness. That happiness can carry you because that happiness can snowball into greater happiness. It can, I mean, I guess not snowball. The metaphor I like to use is like lighting your candle, right? Like you have your flame, and then with that flame, you can light other flames, and all those flames together make a very bright and shiny life. But if you don't have that little flame, and if you're not protecting it, and you're not like putting your hand around it to stop the wind from blowing it away, it gets real dark.
Yeah.
It gets real dark, right?
Self-care and the prioritizing of self-care is something that we're having more discussions about than we used to. It was just always something that it was thought that you just do your self-care activities and you don't really talk about them, or even, or is the case for most people, they're also the first things to go if you have other duties, as you're saying, and it's just always been, I shouldn't be doing things for myself. That's selfish. Ignoring that piece of, I can't be me without that. I think of this as being a psychologist. I can't be a good therapist if my own mental health is to the point where I can't function. Right? If I'm sitting in sessions and I'm always distracted because I cannot deal with my own mental health, or I'm not finding ways to cope or ways to kind of let that little bit light just get protected and get, buffered, then I'm not going to be good at my job. And I really like with what I do for a living, I shouldn't be at work. And that's like, but once again, that's also the flip side of the nature of where we're at in society of like, within the field of mental health, people don't talk about their own mental health struggles. It's like the idea of like, well, but like, do you really want me coming in and helping you if I am not at my top, right? Like I could theoretically be doing damage and harm to other people's mental health.
Exactly.
But if I take a day off for mental health and I say it's for mental health, I'm going to be hearing from my supervisors about like, well, what are you doing? What do you, like, are you okay? Like, well, do we have a talk? And then it's never a, those talks are not really as supportive as they're meant to be.
They're not for your mental health. That's
no,
they're for your financial health.
Yes. But yeah,
it's funny because like, over the pandemic, I've gotten into a lot of groups with other like clergy of other denominations because there's not a lot of Hindu priests that speak English that are on Twitter, but I've gotten into a lot of these kind of groups where we sit and can vent to each other, or not just vent, but like have an outlet and have somebody that you can like. It's weird because when you're in a priestly position, my culture doesn't even have these types of confessional priests that we do in the West. But because I'm a Westerner, because that's a tradition that a lot of diaspora Hindus have grown up in, they expect that a priest is going to be able to sit there and listen and answer back. And luckily, I know how to do that, and I'm trained in that. But being able to go into a group and just sit there with other rabbis and preachers and whatever teachers of the word, and be able to sit there and say like, yo, I need help. I can't do this. I can't deal with all of these sorrows on my own. Has been so uplifting and strengthening, because having community and having conversation and knowing that you're not the only one walking with this kind of just burden. And it's tough. like some of my friends are like, yo, dude, you think it's tough? Try being a rabbi when like every synagogue is getting shot up by white supremacists every other day. And I'm like, look, man, I lived through 9/11. I know, but I don't know the way you know, because you've been living through 9/11 for 5,000 years, right? Like, and it's just like, it's a perspective dose, but it's also, you can't heal yourself. Sometimes you can, and sometimes intense meditation and focus and figuring your business out. But you know what? The folks who can do that are the folks we found religions around, right? Like the Buddha was able to sit under a tree for 9 months, figure out what made him sad, and then it worked for like the next 6,000 years for people. But most of us need another person to talk to, because I tried sitting under a tree, man. It doesn't work for me.
Like, well, yeah.
Like, no. I mean, it's true.
I like my mindfulness. I like it. I did a mindfulness this afternoon. This is a completely just random aside, but I've discovered in the last year or two, and I don't know if this is it can something that can happen versus just like you develop it versus it's always been a thing. But have you ever heard of aphantasia?
Aphantasia. Is it like losing like your ability to see things in your memory?
Yeah, so it's like you not being able to, like, if somebody asks you, to recall a red apple, and it's on cue. It doesn't mean that you can't like have a mind's eye type thing, but you can't do it just on cue. Somebody says, picture a red apple in your mind, and you close your eyes and there's no red apple. I'm one of those people. And so while I lead a lot of guided meditations and I like guided meditation, Leaves on a Stream, which is one of my favorite to be a leader of and to go through and to teach to other people, is not effective for me because I'm not picturing those leaves very well right now in my life.
Right.
So I actually today, when I sat down this afternoon with a break, was looking up guided meditations that are more, that are a lot more mind-body connection. So it's more just about the body
counting
piece to
your
it.
Breath.
Counting my breath or sensations in the body. It doesn't have to have imagery but a lot of what we do for mindfulness that I think of is imagery based. So it's like, okay, cool. That only gets me so far anyway, no matter what. It's great. It's part of my routine. It's part of my self-care. It's not getting me there 100%. Absolutely is not.
It's wild. Like, I grew up in an entire tradition based around meditation and yoga and focus and all that. And the thing that taught me how to do this was reading Wheel of Time, wherein the character Lan Mandragoran goes to Randall Thor and says, "This is how you learn how to shoot in a bow properly. Imagine a flame in your head, throw all the garbage in, and leave the thing that you're trying to focus on." I'm like, did Robert Jordan just teach me how to meditate? Is that what just happened here? And it's like, turns out, weird neo-Buddhism, it doesn't matter where the teaching comes from. If it works for you, it works for you, right? Like, that's one of the things that, like, I find so important is like, look, it doesn't matter the source. Just do the things that will get you through the day. Look, meditation is not for everybody. Breathing exercises aren't for everybody, because some of us have ADD. We can't sit still. We can have too many thoughts in our head to be able to sit there and sort through and sift them out. That's fine and fair. You know what else you can do? Walk. Take a walk and meditate. Walking meditation, or listening to a song or a podcast, or watching the tree behind your house flutter with birds. Who knows? Playing with your dog is meditation. Do that. Find these small places. I mean, for some people, sorting cards, like closer to our home is like, yo, dude, just take that pile of cards that's been sitting on your desk since Ikoria, put them in order by color, and just by color. Something that simple. You can do that. You don't need to trip about, oh no, the sets are all wrong. Just, who cares? Sort them by colors and just sit and don't think about anything else, and just allow this to wash over you, and just use that to calm down, slow down, and handle yourself.
It's helped me a lot to move to this idea of just intentionality.
Yes.
So, doesn't matter what it is. It's that I'm doing it with an intention, and then I'm actually, I'm thinking about doing it. And so I'm actually doing it. I'm not just mindlessly kind of engaging. So, that has been the biggest thing for me. I'm approaching it with a purpose. As you said, that purpose may simply be, I'm just going to sort cards because I need to distract myself, but I'm going to put them in by a color or something. Okay. Doesn't matter what set, but at least I'm doing something that I'm having to shift my attention away from whatever is going on in my head that I need a break from.
Yes. Even something as simple as just washing your dishes. Or like, and I realize it's not simple for everybody, but something as mundane as like handling, replacing the toilet paper in your bathroom, whatever it is, do something with intention, do something with that forces you to take an action, and then do it with focus. And you can sit and take these small steps and build yourself back up into a person.
I love the dishwashing one because that's the one that I've kind of used with people, because that toothbrushing, these things that you do almost like second nature because they're chores or they're habits, to actually slow down and do them is just an amazing exercise. The like dish piece, I hate dishes. I have always hated them. But there can be something therapeutic if I'm approaching it with like, I'm going to actually notice the temperature of the water. I'm going to actually kind of like pay attention to the texture of what, like if I'm doing a fork or if I'm doing a knife versus a plate, that I'm noticing those textures. It's just, how am I engaging myself?
Exactly.
The toothbrush is the same thing. Like actually paying attention to it, like actually paying attention to brushing your teeth is actually kind of weird. It kind of freaks me out, but it's also very good exercise.
Because you got a lot of teeth and there's a lot of surface, and then there's a lot of bristles on random places. Or even like simple things like, grooming your hair, or like, just like there's basic functions that we do as humans that we take for granted. But when you sit and stop and actually do them with purpose, do them with intention, do them with like the idea of understanding, then you can sit there and start to just like, I mean, the whole purpose of these exercises is not necessarily like, I'm better at dishwashing now. It's more to just sit there and say, like, it's more to give yourself a moment to let your brain stop trying to run full bore at all times. Because you've heard this millions of times, that humanity was not evolved to handle the entire problems of the universe simultaneously, right? Like we were not meant to have a full bore hose of information pouring at our face 25 hours a day. So allowing yourself to sit there and say like, I need to get a new sponge. I need to get some, like, I need to pump another thing of soap into my sponge to wash the crud off of this plate. That forces you to use your full brain to do something mundane. And in that mundanity, in that half an hour or whatever it takes you to do this hour long, you breathe. You get a moment to just put your shoulders down, to let the stress kind of just wash off and be like, the fire will still be there.
Oh yeah, it's not going anywhere. You don't have to worry about that. Right. You don't need to. It's going to be there.
More nonsense. Always another set, man.
my co-host Alex for Christmas got me a planner, and I am not typically one that has done as well with planning in general. Like I struggle with it. Organization is not my strong suit. It's something that I wanted to work on as a skill. Like it is a skill, right? I can take some steps to do things better than I have been. When I got it though, him and I actually sat down and did a whole episode on this planner, because the planner flat out is organized in a way that I can personalize it, but it mentions things from mindfulness to just the categories of things that it does to remind you is like, what are some good memories that you created this month? It's just like, it's prompts in such a way that it's not just, even though my schedule's in there, I'm writing down daily what my tasks are. I'm making checklists, I'm making to-do lists, but it literally says something like, what memories did you make? What was it like? It has these categories. It has a category that I love that's like things not to do. Like, which to me is just like a way of like, we always frame things as like a to-do list, but like we also have to not do lists, but I need to formalize actually thinking of them. And there's a whole, throughout the book, it is structured in a way to be very mindfully approaching a planner. And I'm only like 2 weeks into using it, but like, it's actually been pretty good. Like I'm actually doing more at least. And it doesn't feel like I'm doing something that's judgmental. Like I don't cross everything off. It's a failure, which is what my issue is with to-do lists. It's like, I tend to look at them and think of them as like things that have to be fully completed and if they aren't, then that's a judgment about me, versus I'm putting in memories that I created. I've been writing down those 3 good things. I just created my own section because there was blank sections you could use. So I needed something that was mindful when it came to organization, because organization for the sake of organization is never going to click with me. Yeah. It's just not. That memories one is really important too, because I will say this is the older I get, I luckily know enough about my body and about mental health and about psychology and about neurological disorders to know that I don't have dementia. However, I have memory issues where I don't remember things well.
I have the world's most porous memory. Yeah. And like, I will immediately forget things tomorrow, and it happens all the time.
Yeah. And like, my depression and anxiety have robbed me of like things that I've done with people that are really important to me and that are good. But if I don't have some sort of a reminder to them, they're gone. And this is where having a cell phone has been like the greatest thing. I take photos. I love taking photos. Like, photography is one of my hobbies. And it's only been within this last year that's connected with me, that my brain might've been seeking out something that was preserving memories in a different way as like a compensatory strategy. Because now I like scroll through my phone. If my daughter wants to see photos of something, if I scroll back to show her a photo from a year ago, I'm then reminded of what we were doing. And then I can put myself back in that place a lot better. But free recall, it's gone. Like, I'm not going to remember those good times I had.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I know that feeling very well. And it's weird because like, even down to things like, people will be like, hey, so what do you think about the thing we talked about? I'm like, what did we talk about? And now Twitter has started like erasing old DMs and only showing you like the new conversation. I'm like, how does this help me? How does it help me? It doesn't help. It doesn't at all. Man, this has been a heavy duty conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a great conversation. Like, this is the type of, like, you were saying earlier,
like, you and I have been friends for a long time. And like, you know, we share a lot of things in this hobby. And obviously I figured this is where we would go, but I didn't think this is where we would go, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. But man, it's been lovely talking to you. I'm a big fan of you and your work and all of your advocacy, and I have the utmost respect for it. And I think your podcast is rad. And I'm glad that we were able to finally get together and hang out.
Me too. And next time we'll talk about something that's just off the wall, silly, and like, I don't even know.
We'll talk about goblins, man.
Right. We could talk about goblins. Like, there we go. I got a whole deck of artist proofs sitting right next to me in a wooden deck
artist
box.
Proofs. That's
whole box.
Like, we could talk about artist proofs all day.
Yeah.
You should come back and we should do that and like have a not like heavy conversation.
Yeah, let's do
this.
And
I can tell you about how I sing Goblins of the Flarg to the tune of Riders on the Storm. Goblins of the Flarg. You know?
Dun, 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 dun. Oh yeah, exactly, I'm here for this. I'm here for this.
It's so good. But God, man, Goblins of the Flarg. There's a memory from 5 years ago. I didn't even ask you why you like goblins, but we will save that for another day. And if folks wanted to find you, where could they go?
Twitter at HobbesQ or at Goblin Lore Pod. That's the main area that I'm at.
Cool. And you can find me at Gearboard Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are told, or at CoolStuffInc every Tuesday, or at YouTube when I bother to upload it. My editor, EK, is a real genius, sweetheart, and I'm grateful to be working with him.
EK is amazing.
We've got every episode from 100 on through now.
Wow.
Up there, and we're working on backlogging and backfilling as we go.
That's awesome.
And I'm deeply grateful for all the effort that he's put in. But again, my friends, remember, it is not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.